We have a verdict in Donald Trump's hush money trial. It is far from over.
That's right. Defense attorneys now have 2 weeks to file motions, right, and then appeal the verdict. Attorney Bernarda Villalona, she is joining us again this morning to share her legal insight on this whole process. Back for day two. We were just talking yesterday with you about how long it could potentially be for a verdict, right? Then yesterday we got to know the jury was going home, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's a verdict. Let's get your take first and foremost. As an attorney, you thought right away when they said verdict guilty, but did you think all 34?
So right away when I heard that there was a verdict, first off, I was like, wait, some confusion, because I thought that the judge was going to let them relieve the jury to return the next day, because we hadn't heard a peep from them all afternoon, and I'm right in front of the courthouse. So when they said verdict, I knew it had to be a conviction. It had to be a guilty verdict. Not sure if on all 34 counts, but definitely it had to be guilty. And the reason why is that given the long closing arguments by the prosecution, where I was in a courtroom for that, he was so detailed in his analysis that I said, this is going to speed up the jury deliberations. Given that, and also the questions by the juror, what they requested from the judge, and the readback of the jury instructions, that it had to be a guilty conviction because they had already made a decision that the documents were falsified.
It wasn't it didn't sound like with what they were asking that they were looking for reasonable doubt at all.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. You never know what a jury is actually thinking. We try to read the tea leaves with the notes that they send out, but also you have to think that this jury had all of the exhibits in the jury deliberation room, and in fact that the jurors asked for the judge to provide them with headphones or even speakers for them to be able to listen to the evidence. And what was the audio that they needed to listen to? And that was the phone call that was recorded by Michael Cohen inside of the Oval Office.
Yeah, before we look ahead to what comes next, I want to get your take on something that the lawyer for Mr. Trump said last night on CNN. Todd Blanche was there giving an interview where he said the jury, they were banking on the fact that the jury would believe Michael Cohen was a liar, and that because they didn't believe that, that's why they lost the case. You listened to the testimony yourself. You were in the courtroom. You're an attorney. What do you make of that?
Well, he decided to bet on the wrong horse. That was the problem with Todd Blanche. He's a former federal prosecutor, not a former state prosecutor. And in terms of the criminal defense experience, I believe it's quite minimum what he had. So in terms of them banking on Michael Cohen and banking that the jury wouldn't believe a liar, I was in a courtroom for the 4 days of testimony with Michael Cohen. And given my experience, 20 years prosecuting as well as criminal defense, I've put on witnesses with robbery convictions, assault convictions, stabbing, shooting, and been able to present that to a jury and get a verdict of guilty. So when Michael Cohen testified, and I listened to him testifying, he owned up to his wrongs. He owned up to his flaws. He owned up to pleading guilty. He owned up to everything that he has done, even the taking of money from the Trump organization. So given that he was upfront about that, and the corroboration that the prosecution had, and it was a lot of corroboration that they had, and let's not forget that recording from the Oval Office where he records Donald Trump talking about the payment to Karen McDougal, I knew that it wouldn't be difficult for this jury to accept him and accept the testimony from him, as well as the corroboration, as long as the prosecution delivered during closing arguments and not try to vouch for him, but instead say, look, I'm presenting to you for who he is. And we're not presenting him to take care of your child or to get in business with you, but can you accept what he's telling you? It takes a person that's playing dirty with Donald Trump to be able to return that, give the information that this prosecution needed about this crime.
Well, let's talk about next steps then, starting with the defense. I mean, they were probably laying out what issues to appeal depending on whatever the verdict was, correct? I mean, so where do they go next? What is the next step for the defense?
So there is one appeal that they can do prior to the sentencing, and here in New York, pursuant to 33030, they can file an appeal to the judge, to Judge Merchan, to set aside the verdict on 3 different grounds. That can be there was juror misconduct, it can be newly discovered evidence, or it can be that there's an error that took place during the trial that if it were to be appealed to the appellate division or to the Court of Appeal, it will require automatic reversal. As of now, he doesn't have any of those 3. So highly unlikely that Judge Merchan is going to grant that. After sentencing, they can then go ahead and file an appeal to the appellate division. And in terms of what they're going to appeal on, you got to think, Every time there was an objection in that courtroom, they are going to use those objections and those bases for those objections that were not sustained as grounds for an appeal, and also change of venue, that Stormy Daniels shouldn't have testified, the jury instructions, a whole bunch of grounds for appeal. Not to say that he's going to likely prevail on an appeal.
Real quick, because we're almost out of time. I know it's tough to predict, and it's reading the tea leaves here and looking at the magic crystal ball. Prison time. Seems like everybody has an opinion if the judge is actually going to sentence him to actual prison time, anywhere from 2 weeks to however many years, 4 years for each count, right? What's your take?
The possibility is there. The possibility is there because there have been, if you look at the statistics for New York County, I believe it's in between November of 2020 and March of 2024, over 450 cases for falsifying business records. 12% of those cases resulted in prison time. So it's not out of the well. Purpose of sentencing is accountability, deterrence, and rehabilitation. So Judge Mershon is going to have to structure a sentence that's going to encompass all three of them and also take into account the severity of crime. Yes, it's nonviolent. However, the underlying crime here affected the 2016 election. And also, let's not forget Donald Trump's conduct throughout this whole trial, where he disparages the judge, the family, the witnesses, the whole world, anyone against him.
Okay.
Should be interesting to see what happens next. Thanks so much for coming in again on this Friday morning.
Hopefully, you can get some rest this weekend.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So, get some
Hopefully,
rest
we
for
all
now.
can get some rest.
Exactly.